Hi there, I'm Maura, and once I was accused of stealing a family heirloom. But the truth? They didn't just take a necklace from me. They erased my place in the family, rewrote the will, and made me sleep beside the water heater like I was just passing through. Why would people who claim to love you go that far to silence you? Have you ever been blamed just to protect someone else's lie? What's the most painful thing your family has ever said, or not said? What time are you listening to this and where are you watching from? Drop a comment, I really want to know. I didn't expect balloons, but I didn't expect a lock on my old room either. Cynthia stood by the front door with that half smile she reserved for strangers she tolerated. "Your sister has the guest room now," she said, brushing her manicured nails against the doorframe. I caught Dennis glancing at me and looking away just as fast, like my presence disrupted something sacred. She led me down the hallway, past the scent of lemon polish and cold beef stew, to the storage room. Not even a real bedroom. A cot leaned crooked against a wall lined with stacked boxes. Juno, the old Labrador, had a bed fluffier than mine. He looked up at me with more welcome in his eyes than either of them had mustered. The air was stale with mothballs and memories I hadn't asked to revisit. "I hope this is okay," Cynthia muttered without waiting for my response. "We're stretched thin." I nodded, said nothing. The silence wasn't peace. It pulsed, practiced, like a script they'd rehearsed for years, while I played the ghost. The cot creaked beneath me as I sat. The dog sighed and turned his back. 16 years ago, I used to be the center of this house. Sunday breakfasts, birthday cards with glitter, laughter loud enough to spill into the yard. Now I was a logistical problem, an afterthought assigned a broom closet. I ran my fingers along the paint-chipped wall and stopped at a faint scratch. MS 2005. My initials, the year before everything unraveled. The laughter from the living room seeped in, muffled but vibrant. Forks clinked, someone toasted to something. I wasn't invited, I wasn't even remembered. I lay down, staring at the ceiling with eyes that refused to close. My body was here, but my place had been erased. The room smelled like old paper and forgotten truths. I could hear Cynthia's voice floating in. "She's always been dramatic." Dennis responding, "Let her cool off. She'll adjust." No one asked why I came back. Not really. I pulled out my headphones, scrolled past playlists until I landed on a podcast about wrongful convictions. Irony or instinct, I didn't know. The host's voice was calm, measured. Sometimes justice is just the start, not the end. My chest tightened. I hadn't come here for reconciliation, not entirely. I came to reclaim something no one admitted they stole. A sudden slam echoed from the hallway. I sat up. Juno growled low in his throat. I looked at the ceiling again, then whispered to the dark, "They think I forgot." I never did. In the living room, framed above the mantel, was a wedding photo of Lynette, Cynthia's favorite child, beaming in white silk, wearing a necklace that didn't belong to her. I came back for closure, but this house has other plans. I woke up with a crick in my neck, and the weight of last night still stitched into my spine. The cot groaned beneath me like it too resented being here. The room smelled like dust and disuse, and the old blanket wrapped around me had the scent of mothballs and a memory I didn't want. Downstairs, the clatter of breakfast, mugs clinking, chairs scraping, the easy rhythm of family pretending, played like a distant party I was never meant to attend. I sat up. An envelope lay on the cot beside me, my name scrawled on the front, tight and neat like a bill. I opened it. Electricity, groceries, water, and one line near the bottom that made my breath catch. Heirloom Restoration Fund. My hands shook. I didn't come here to split utilities. I didn't come here to be listed like a tenant. I came home. At the kitchen table, Cynthia poured coffee as if the morning were ordinary. "It's just symbolic," she said, flipping her hair like a page she couldn't be bothered to read. Lynette put it together. I glanced at Dennis. His coffee cup hovered near his lips, untouched. "It's about respect," I said, my voice low, measured. "Not money." Lynette sauntered in with a smile dipped in syrup. You're being so sensitive. It's just a way to keep things balanced. You know, fair. Fair. That word scraped. I folded the invoice and slid it into my jacket. The silence between us vibrated like a pulled wire, tight and ready to snap. But I didn't. Not yet. I waited until the house quieted, then slipped into the office Dad used to guard like a fortress. The shelves stood untouched. A ledger sat on the desk, not dusty, recently used. I flipped it open. The handwriting was wrong. I pulled out an old birthday card, signed by Dad. The loops in the D, the slant of the H, different. The entries in the ledger had a sharper tilt, Lynette's handwriting, masked beneath the pretense of order. She forged his name. My throat tightened. The invoice wasn't symbolic. It was a lie dressed as tradition. I whispered to the empty room, "You rewrote the rules and signed them with someone else's pen." I didn't feel rage, not then, just cold. Like standing in a room with no insulation, wind slipping through every crack. Outside the office, footsteps, voices. "I saw her face when she opened it," Lynette said, amused. "Yeah, she's taking the bait." I froze, a pause, then her voice again, hushed but triumphant. "Good. Let her get mad, that's the plan." My gaze caught on the family portrait above the fireplace, Lynette in the center, me blurred in the corner, an afterthought even in still life. "Game on," I whispered. The invitation to dinner came out of nowhere. Cynthia called up the storage room stairs like it was the most natural thing in the world, her voice dripping with pretend warmth. "We're setting an extra plate for you tonight, Maura." I hesitated. Every cell in my body screamed to stay put, but curiosity, that cruel instinct, shoved me down the stairs. The dining room looked exactly the same as it did a decade ago. Same floral placemats, same cracked salt shaker, but everything felt staged, like a set built for a play I hadn't been cast in. The chair at the far end had my name on it, literally, a place card. Lynette ran the conversation like a conductor with a manic baton. She gushed about her promotion. Cynthia chimed in, reminiscing about a trip I wasn't part of. I tried inserting a memory. "Remember when Grandpa fell asleep during Grace and knocked over the—" Cynthia cut in with a fake laugh. "You always were dramatic, even back then." I stabbed at the broccoli on my plate, eyes fixed on the centerpiece. Then I mentioned it, the night the heirloom disappeared. "There were security cameras back then. Maybe the footage—" A loud cough from Lynette. Then Cynthia's voice, all syrup and steel. "Let's not drag that old drama to the table." The room froze. No one looked at me, not even Dennis. I wasn't invited to speak. I was tolerated. They still controlled the script, and I was the girl without lines. I forced a smile. My fork scraped the plate. I said nothing else. After dinner, while the others drifted to the living room, I found Dennis rinsing dishes. The clatter of ceramic masked my steps. "Did you ever hear me say it?" I asked. "That I stole it?" He didn't turn around. "Your mother said you confessed. But did you hear me say it?" Silence. Then, "Number." I didn't think I needed to ask. Something cold bloomed in my chest. I nodded, just once, then left him there with the sink running. Back in the storage room, I opened the journal I'd hidden beneath the cot and wrote, "I'm not staying quiet anymore." I opened my laptop, fingers moving fast, search terms, data recovery, archived drives. A shadow paused outside the cracked door. Lynette. She didn't speak, neither did I. I just closed the laptop, slowly, like a door. Let them watch. I'm done hiding. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. My feet barely made a sound against the wood, but my breath caught when I heard a voice, Lynette's, coming from her room. A whisper laced with tension. "Eleanor still remembers. I told you she's a risk." A pause. "We'll make sure she stays quiet." I froze. Eleanor, our old housekeeper, she'd practically raised me. Her silence had always felt like protection. Now it sounded like a liability. I crept back to my room, heart thudding. Wrote her name in my notebook, underlined it, twice. 16 years ago. I'd been crying on the porch, suitcase at my feet. Cynthia had shoved me out like garbage, but it was Eleanor who came out after her, who tried to say something, anything. She squeezed my hand. Her mouth opened, but Cynthia barked her down. Later that night, Eleanor found me again in the guest house. "You didn't do it," she'd whispered. "I saw her." She meant Lynette, holding the box, slipping down the hall. I searched for her online. No social media, just a landline in Fair Grove, rural, isolated. I dialed before I could talk myself out of it. "Hello? It's Maura. Do you remember me?" A pause. Then, "Yes." We met the next day in a diner off the interstate. Eleanor looked smaller, older, but her eyes, sharp as ever. "I thought you'd never call," she said, sliding into the booth. She pulled something from her purse, a letter yellowing at the edges, typed and unsigned, threatening to revoke her pension, legal jargon, mentions of consequences if she ever spoke about the night the heirloom disappeared. "Who sent this?" I asked, voice low. The envelope had a firm name, Cobb and Dorsey. Matthew's firm. I never told anyone, not even my kids. I leaned forward. "Why now?" She looked away, then back. "Because I think you're ready." She slid a napkin across the table. "There's something I kept. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it's time." Inside was a photo, blurry, time-stamped. Lynette, holding the necklace. 4 hours after she claimed it vanished. My throat tightened. I didn't have proof, now I do. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. No caller ID. A text. "Stop digging." I took a screenshot. Then I deleted it. I hadn't meant to clean. It just started with shoving a box, then pulling at dust-caked sheets until something fell. The bedsheet unfurled in my hands, stiff with age and stained with something too rust-colored to be wine. I froze. Buried beneath it was a photograph, me and Grandma, a week before it all imploded. Her arm draped over my shoulder, the necklace glinting under her fingers, around my neck. "I didn't steal anything. She gave it to me," I whispered into the silence. My hands trembled, but not from fear. Not this time. The laptop blinked awake as I dug through a drawer for the old flash drive I'd found last year, forgotten until now. Plugging it in felt like detonating a time bomb. A folder blinked open. Security_2008. My pulse thudded in my ears. I clicked. There she was, Lynette. Tiptoeing past the living room camera at 2:13 a.m., clutching something wrapped in silk. She glanced over her shoulder, slipped it into her purse, and disappeared from frame. I didn't blink. Couldn't. Rewind. Play again. I leaned in closer. Just before the screen faded to black, she turned and looked directly at the lens. And smirked. She knew. She always knew. I gripped the flash drive until the plastic groaned. It wasn't just theft. It was performance. A role she'd rehearsed, polished, made people believe. And I'd been the scapegoat she painted with guilt. She needed me to be the villain, I said aloud, voice flat. She built a whole life on it. I uploaded the video to a secure cloud, labeled the folder, "If I Disappear." Then I printed stills, her hand on the necklace, the timestamp, the smirk. I slid them into a plain envelope and tucked it into my journal. Dinner that night was roast and red wine. Laughter echoed off the walls like nothing had ever cracked them. I watched her toast to family resilience. Cynthia smiled like she hadn't exiled me to the storage room. Dennis refilled her glass like truth didn't matter. I sat in silence, didn't chew, didn't blink. Let her enjoy the last supper she thinks she controls. Tomorrow I speak, and this time no one cuts me off. The garage smelled like gasoline and defeat. I found him crouched beside the old mower, elbow deep in grime like he could scrub away a decade's worth of silence. "You knew," I said, my voice low, steady. "Didn't you?" He didn't look up. The wrench in his hand stilled. For a second I thought he wouldn't answer. "I doubted," he said finally. "But Cynthia..." "She didn't, and He stopped. "I didn't want to make things worse." I stared at him. "For who?" He stood slowly, wiped his hands on a rag that used to be white. Your mother said if we questioned the story, we'd tear the family apart. So you let it tear me apart instead. He winced, but didn't argue. That made it worse. Later that evening, I needed a lighter. I rummaged through the old toolbox under the workbench, brushing past loose nails and oil-stained gloves. That's when I found the envelope, aged, yellowing, sealed. It was addressed to the Springfield School Board. I opened it with the precision of someone performing an autopsy. Inside, a letter, typed but signed by hand. Dennis had written it in 2009. He defended my character, my academic integrity. He swore I didn't steal. He begged the board to reconsider my expulsion. But the letter had never been mailed. The date, March 10th. The week after Cynthia told them to let it go. I sat on the garage floor, letter in hand, breathing like I'd run a marathon through smoke. He was going to fight for me. And then he didn't. I didn't confront him again. He'd made his choice. The silence had calcified. Instead, I slipped the letter into my growing folder of truth. Footage, photographs, transcripts. The rage I felt wasn't fire anymore. It was ice. Quiet, sharp, patient, ready. That night, I left without a word. Drove through the dark like a woman with a compass buried in her gut. At the courthouse, the fluorescent lights buzzed with disinterest. The clerk eyed me as I approached. I need a copy of the revised will for Edna Clark, my grandmother. Are you authorized? She asked, hand hovering over the drawer. I'm her blood, I replied. I'll prove it if I have to. Her hand paused, then slowly reached into the file cabinet. She pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. In the corner, revised 2018.
The courthouse smelled like dust and old grievances. I slid the manila envelope across the desk and asked for the 2008 file. The clerk, disinterested, typed slowly, chewing on a pen cap. Minutes stretched before she returned, dropping a yellowing will in front of me. I opened both the original and the one labeled Revised, 2018. There it was. My name clear as breath in. Clause 14. All personal jewelry, including the blue sapphire necklace to be passed to my granddaughter, Maura L. Sanderson. The revised version didn't just omit me, it replaced me, to the next of kin residing at the estate. I could feel the ink slicing deeper than any blade I was stolen by sentence. My fingers shook, but I flipped to the signature page. The ink on the revised will gleamed unnaturally, too fresh. The loops in the signature didn't match my grandmother's natural tremor. Back in my car, I called Eleanor's contact, a retired forensic handwriting analyst who owed her a favor. By afternoon, he had the verdict. The ink in the revised version manufactured in late 2018. Impossible in 2008. He slid the papers back with a sigh. You've got forgery. They hadn't just rewritten history. They'd tried to erase me from it entirely. I went home and laid everything out on my bed. The original will, the security footage, the invoice scams, Eleanor's statement, Dad's unsent letter. It wasn't a file anymore. It was an arsenal. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. Rage kept me warm. Focus kept me moving. The next evening, I waited until dinner. The table was already set, voices rising with false warmth. Lynette was telling a story I'd heard her fake before. Cynthia laughed too loud. I walked in, quiet, certain. No one stopped eating, not even when I placed a flash drive in the center of the table. Lynette froze. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. You lied, I said. You forged. You deleted me. Dennis looked away. But memory, I continued voice, even unlike ink, doesn't fade. I reached for the laptop on the sideboard, plugged in the drive, and hit play, first static. Then, a grainy hallway, Lynette clutching the necklace, pausing, smirking. The sound of her voice crackled through the room. Let her get mad! That's the plan. I didn't flinch. I zipped the last bag without a sound. No tears, no nostalgia, just the necklace nestled among folded clothes, and a small note resting on the hallway table. I was never just a guest. Cynthia stood at the stove, stirring something she wouldn't serve me. Her eyes flicked toward me. Then away. I didn't wait for a goodbye. Dennis lowered the garage door with his back turned. I stepped out into the sun like it was mine again. Driving through Springfield was like peeling off a second skin. I passed the school that handed me a verdict before I had a trial. The church where Grandma used to hum hymns louder than anyone else. A decade of shame layered on memory, and yet today I felt nothing crumble. Legacy, that word had haunted me. Their legacy was built on silence, guilt-swapped survival, forged documents, and bitter dinners. Mine would be different. Mine would stand unwhispered. My phone rang. I didn't even need to check the screen to know, Mom, I let it ring. Let it scream. Then I pressed decline. Not out of anger, but because I didn't owe her another chance to twist the air between us into a noose. I shut the phone off and buried it in the glove compartment. Like the relic it was. I wasn't running. I wasn't escaping. I was reclaiming. At the edge of town, I stopped at a gas station, bought coffee I didn't need, and slid into the corner booth with my laptop. The document glowed on the screen. They said I stole an heirloom, but they stole my name, my voice, my place in this world. Until now, I uploaded the video, the statements, the letters, every scrap of truth to a secure server, under the care of a legal firm. Eleanor trusted, I labeled the folder, for when they deny everything. Outside, the sky looked wider. The silence didn't hum anymore. It breathed. As I started the engine, the rearview mirror caught Cynthia standing at the window, her phone still in her hand. Still waiting, she would wait a long time. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Signing my name on the final document, I didn't expect a swell of satisfaction. There was no surge, just steadiness. The kind that came from knowing I didn't need to burn bridges. I just had to walk past them. The assistant at the lawyer's office looked up. Do you want to pursue charges? I paused, fingers still near the pen. No, I said. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about being heard. And I had been. Maybe not when it would have saved me. But now, when it mattered to me, I left the office without looking back. No headline, no public war. Just a quiet win stitched into legal paperwork and sealed folders. Back in my apartment, I lit the fireplace for the first time in months. The final letter sat in my lap, addressed to Cynthia and Dennis. Not accusatory, not pleading, just truth. I read it out loud, once my voice barely a whisper, even to myself. Then I fed it to the flame. 16 years ago, Grandma had given me the necklace. In the warmth of that same living room, they turned against me. She'd clasped it around my neck with shaking fingers and whispered, "This is yours. Remember who you are." They made sure I'd forget. I dropped a copy of the original will into a manila envelope. No return address. Just a silent fact on paper. I mailed it to the house I never planned to walk into again. The next chapter had to be mine. I moved to Chicago and walked into a bookstore with walls that smelled like worn paper and second chances. You hiring? I asked. The manager smiled. Always for readers, I rewrote my resume that night. No more gaps, no more shame. Every year they stole was a line reclaimed. I joined a grief writing circle. At my first reading, my voice shook only once. They clapped anyway. One woman cried. Afterward, she leaned in and said, "Your story." I think it saved a piece of me. I wanted to say mine too, but I just nodded. Weeks passed. Then a padded envelope arrived. No sender. Just my name and a slanted script. I knew before I opened it. Inside was a photo, me and Grandma, on the porch swing, the necklace glinting on my collarbone. Behind it, a velvet pouch, the bracelet, and a note. "One day, you'll wear this freely." I stared at it for minutes. Not everything hurt anymore, but not everything healed either. I placed the bracelet beside the necklace, side by side, twin truths I no longer had to hide from. One day, I whispered, "I'll believe I deserved it."
In the end, I didn't need revenge. I needed release. Life doesn't always give you the justice you deserve, but it will offer you the chance to reclaim your voice, if you're willing to speak, even when it shakes. I learned that silence isn't peace, it's the echo of fear. And forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means freeing yourself from the weight of someone else's story. So let me ask you, have you ever been wrongly blamed for something and chose healing over hate? Or are you still holding on to a truth no one believed? If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't, I still want to hear your thoughts. Let's talk, let's connect, let's grow. If you found this video meaningful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story like this one. Your next chapter might start here,